sermon. In the name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Just last week we heard Jesus telling the disciples, and by extension us, to love one another. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. In this context, it seems pretty easy to love each other, and even in certain circumstances, lay down our lives for those whom we love. When Jesus says love each other, I quickly recall my family, my closest friends, and all of you in this room and think, yes, I do love them, just as Christ loves me. It's not hard to love those with whom I laugh. It is not difficult to enjoy the company of those with whom I share a meal. And even when the world grows troubled around us, that love does not dissipate when we are driven to tears of sorrow or angst. In fact, we realize it is a part of our love for each other that sees us through a process of consolation and healing. It is easy to love one another when we start off by liking those who we love. And yet in this week's reading, things shift a bit, for Jesus is exhibiting a greater love than one might imagine when we give a passing glance at his command to love one another. In this week's gospel, Jesus prays, Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. This prayer, this plea for protection, ends not with the words, so there may be one Episcopal body, or one Presbyterian gathering, or one Catholic congregation. Jesus is not separating Jews from Christians and Christians from Muslims. Instead, Christ appeals to God, asking that we all may be one. There then is the difficulty in last week's command that we love each other. This is a world of division and discord. It is as intolerant as it is separated. Our political discourse relies on division and acrimony. We are constantly at each other's throats, judging each other. Our side is better than their side. My opinion is more correct than yours. We choose not to see God in the one with whom we disagree. We choose to maintain our fiefdoms, and we choose to ignore Jesus' prayer to God that we all become one. And frankly, it can seem to make sense that we wish to maintain our status quo, maintain our judgments and preconceptions of the other, for the stories we hear can be devastating. They can cause us to proceed further into our various zones of comfort. We know who we can trust there. We know and have built the infrastructure of relationship. We are okay with sharing our love with one another because we have not hurt each other as the outside world promises to hurt us. Yet as it might make sense for us to remain huddled in our tightly bound togetherness, this morning's gospel forces us to act differently toward humanity and instead act as Jesus acted towards humanity. When we think of the full breadth and width of the text, we must realize that Jesus' prayer is not asking God to bring us together for the sake of it. The prayer is based on us becoming one so that we can experience the relationship between God and Christ as God and Christ experience their own relationship. It is a prayer for us to realize the salvation that God promises Jesus. It is an invitation for us to truly love and to truly be in relationship with people in all circumstances and in all places. Still, though, it is difficult for us to love those who would or did bring us harm. It is nigh impossible to love those who have assaulted us, who have excluded us, and who have hurt us. While we aspire to be Christians, the requirements of Christianity can sometimes seem overwhelming. And yet there are examples of people coming together after hurt, after awful and terrible pain. We cannot just aspire to being good Christians, we can aspire to the Christianity spoken through the examples of these people. When we can look to the Forgiveness Project. This is a project that brings together the stories of people looking to love those most guilty of hurting them. one posting on their website tells the story of Jin Fori and Letlapa Mfaleli. Letlapa was the leader of a post-apartheid militant group whose aims included inflicting violence on those they felt caused harm to South African blacks. Jin's daughter was the victim of that violence. Jin forgave Letlapa, who ordered the attack, and the people who performed it. In response to her daughter's death, Jin was understandably and justifiably angry. And yet she learned to forgive and learned to heal. Jin writes, "As parents, we struggled to come to terms with our loss. It was a time of deep agony for me, my husband, and our son, Anthony. At the funeral, my eldest brother, who conducted the service, recommended that the most appropriate Christian response to violence is to absorb it, just as Lindy's soft body had done that fateful day." Jin continues, "I sat in the Supreme Court in Cape Town looking at them on the dock, Humphrey, Moseli, and Zola. As I did so, I was confronted by my own feelings of anger and sadness, but somehow I could engender no hate. During the trial, I sent a message to them via the interpreter which said, 'If they are guilty or feel guilty, I forgive them.'" Jin adds, "Many could not countenance the forgiveness for Lindy's killers, but as a Christian I cherish the memory of Christ forgiving his murderers. Since then I have come to understand forgiveness as a process which involves the principled decision to give up your justifiable right to revenge, because to accept violation is a devaluation of self." Finally, Jin writes, "Letlapa's name means man of stone, and I feel that he has been weathered by a formidable struggle to become a child of this soil. I too am a child of this soil. I know his comrades' bullets killed my daughter, and that terrible pain will always be with me, but I have forgiven the man who gave the command. I feel his humanity." Now, I cannot imagine Jin Fori's pain. I cannot not understand the decisions made by Letlapa that led to the death of Jin's daughter. And frankly, if placed in the same position, I do not know if I would be able to manage the grace she gifted to a man responsible for the death of her daughter. Yet I do know that Christ compels us to put aside our pain and start from the one truth that we are all children of God. If we start from there, we can understand that we are all but human and sinners. If we start from there, we will realize that we are born of the same root, grafted on to creation. I do, however, realize the necessity to understand that we are of one people and one God. Through that understanding comes the clarity that only love provides, and that understanding removes the fog of bias and discord that might reside in all of our hearts. Jesus prays for our unity. We cannot turn deaf ears towards his plea. If we are to forgive, and if we are to understand and even welcome the other, the one who does us harm, we are that much closer to salvation. We are that much closer to the salvation that is yet only realized between God the Father and God the Son. It is only through loving others as Jesus commands us to love, without question and without prerequisite, that we will ever attain such a salvation. The journey towards that salvation starts with the decision to become one with all people, including those we find most difficult to love. It starts with a prayer. It starts with God, and it ends with unity, calm, and salvation. Amen.